I thought that these episodes were great, especially episode 6. I thought was one of the best episodes of the show so far. Episode 5 was kind of a reset episode, but I think that's fine. I think that is necessary when you have such a big shakeup of the status quo, like what happened at the end of the Ortbo, the calamitous Ortbo in episode 4. This show is fantastic because it's an inherently cool concept, severance, splitting your brain into two pieces like this, but also because they use that concept in really effective ways to explore really interesting character dynamics. The show has basically just become a bunch of different polycules. And the 6th episode especially explored this. This is such a rich topic for the show that is really central to the show because one of the show's central questions is what transcends this severance barrier. We see that with Mark and Helena in the Chinese restaurant near the end of the episode, where there is just a vibe between the two of them. There is clearly something there that just clicks across that severance barrier. And also, I did wonder if maybe it was like a pheromones thing. I mean, they did share vessels earlier that same day, and neither one of them is showered. Like, it's like, are you guys scenting each other like wolves or something? Helena really does seem to have some kind of a weird fixation with Mark that goes beyond professional research or whatever she was calling it. And I am not surprised by Adam Scott's weird, sexy nerd energy because I did watch Parks and Recreation. He does have incredible on screen chemistry with multiple actresses, I guess. Good for him. I am not someone who generally has strong feelings about on screen romances, but I am rooting so hard for those two crazy kids. I am genuinely pissed off at Audi Mark for fucking this up probably with his reintegration. It seems to me like the reintegration process is less a third Mark being created and more Audi Mark eating any Mark. And he is like the central Mark, the original Mark, whoever. But he is also, it's another case of getting severed is making a decision for this other version of yourself who has no say. And getting reintegrated is still him making a decision without any consideration for what it would mean for his innie, who he had actually already been told, like, has found love. And yeah, he can't necessarily trust what Lumen tells him, but he did not think for a second about reintegrating. And I get it. He wants to see his dead wife, this person he loved deeply, who he thought was dead, and now he has a crazy shot at seeing her again. That totally makes sense. But it really underscores how maybe the innies have souls, but they are still not full people because their existence can just be ripped away from them at any minute. And this episode did emphasize the whole idea of the innie and outie really being two separate people, literally two separate souls, according to Bert and his husband. Now, I don't know how much we should believe what they are saying. I will get into that later. I am very worried about my guy Irving. We hear that the church literally considers innies and outies to be two separate souls, and we have the conversation between Dylan and his wife where she says, you know, don't I see you all the time? And he says, no, like, you see him. I am not him. You have a relationship with him. And Helly is understandably furious that this other version of herself had these experiences in her body as her that she did not get to experience. She talks about how much she hates that her outie has done this to her, that she dresses her every day like a doll. And I think Helly is such an interesting character, Helly and Helena, in part because they are an innie and outie with like two incredibly separate agendas. And I do think that they addressed the Mark and Helly situation in the best way possible. I was a little nervous after episode 5 with Mark being all standoffish with Helly, and I understand why he would be that way. You know, he was manipulated and violated by someone who he thought was someone he cared about. I was kind of annoyed on Helly's behalf, but I thought that behavior makes sense. We also do know that Mark is someone in any iteration who likes to run away from his problems. We saw that with the way he dismissed Irving's death, very similar to the way he just completely dismissed Petey at the beginning of the show. He did need to tell her that he fucked her outie on the Ortbo, and I'm glad that they didn't let that drag along through multiple episodes. And I thought the way that Helly responded was very true to her character. Like, of course, she's upset at first, but we saw that she was the one who kissed Mark in the end of the last season. I like that they let that be something that didn't divide the team any further. You know, it's been sad this season to see the MDR team at odds with each other. They accomplished so much at the end of the first season because they bonded together as a group. And I understand why Dylan was nervous about helping them, why he left the note that Irving made behind the poster in the break room. He doesn't want to lose his privileges to see his beautiful wife, Merritt Weaver. I would also be a bad friend if I got to see my beautiful wife, Merritt Weaver. I was curious as to why Helena approached Outie Mark at the end of the episode. I'm not sure what she gained from that. That just seemed like, of course, that's going to make him super suspicious. And also thought it was interesting that Mark seemed to think that Helena was the one who invented Severance. Now, we know that she didn't at the end of the first season. We hear her talking with her dad, and he tells her about, you know, remember when I showed you the first prototype when she was a kid? But she could have had some sort of role in developing the severance procedure. Like, I do think that the chips do more than just severance. We heard in this episode that the first severed office opened 12 years ago. And I think Helena is supposed to be in her 30s. So she could have had some sort of a role in developing the procedure. We don't know. And it is worth noting that Helena did see Mark glitch, you know, when he saw Gemma's face briefly when they were having sex at the Ortbo. So she might suspect that he is being reintegrated. You know, he's having the nosebleeds in the office. I don't know how much she knows and hears about what goes on the severed floor when she is severed, but it could be that she was visiting him to sort of test that suspicion. She did call Gemma Hannah, which definitely seemed like a test. Lumen does know that Mark knows that Miss Casey Lumen does know that Mark S. knows that Miss Casey was his wife because of Helena, but he doesn't know that they know that. Outie Mark doesn't know, so that could be a reason why they're checking up on him. Although I just don't know why it would be Helena of all people. Maybe she has her own agenda. Or maybe she just wants that cookie again. I do kind of want Helena and Outie Mark to do it. I'm not gonna lie. And we saw that Helena's weird visit was what spurred Mark to continue going through with the reintegration process. I know I have seen some theories that she might be in cahoots with Dr. Ragabe. I'm not as sure about that, but I do think that Dr. Ragabe might be in cahoots with Irving or somewhat connected to what Irving is doing because we heard her ask Mark about a black hallway. And I do think that Dr. Ragabe is on some level manipulating Mark and using his desire to see his wife again, but she did like sound genuine. Like she was tearing up when she was talking to him about, you know, the Gemma that you know is still there. Whether or not she actually believes that remains to be seen. We don't really know if the Gemma that Mark knew is really still there. It seems like Gemma knew Dr. Ragabe in some capacity. I have seen people theorizing that Gemma may have intentionally faked her death to get away from Mark. And while we have seen that Mark probably has a drinking problem that probably preceded his wife's death, and we've seen he's a huge asshole when he's drunk. We did hear Mark when he was talking to Dr. Ragabe about the bargaining stage of grief, talking about, you know, here's all the things I would have done differently. I would have drunk less. So I think it's very plausible that he had a serious pre existing drinking problem. So I think it's very possible that Gemma did want to leave him. We don't have any reason to believe that she would go to such drastic lengths as to fake her own death. That whole DIY brain surgery scene was very difficult to watch. I was kind of going like this the whole time. And also, we saw in the end, like, Dr. Ragabe didn't even give Mark stitches. She just like slapped a band aid on the hole in the back of his head. It is really funny that the first memory he got back was having sex with Helly. And of course, he's like, what the fuck is going on here? It does always bother me in things like this when people just like disregard all the advice that they're given, like blatantly, like Mark running upstairs to see Devin, when he could have easily just ignored her and been like, oh, sorry, I fell asleep. Like, that was kind of frustrating for me, but I guess it is maybe kind of in character for Mark. He does seem like an impulsive person who does not think things through. No, I don't think that Mark is actually going to die. He's a main character, but I do think it is very possible that any Mark, Mark S, is now effectively dead. They did just completely nuke the chip. I really loved the scenes with Dylan and Gretchen. It's always great to see Merritt Weaver. And I am glad that Dylan gets to know his wife, but I'm also like angry at the way that Lumen is manipulating him with this and using this as a way to get him to turn against the rest of the team. And of course, there is the question of, is it cheating? If it is technically still your husband, still the same body? And I would say yes in this case, because Gretchen is lying to Outie Dylan about it. And I see why she would do it. You know, she gets a chance to be with this version of the man she fell in love with. And I get why she does it. You know, she has this chance to be with a version of the man she fell in love with who is unburdened by the world, you know, looks at her like she's the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. I am really happy for Dylan that he gets to have this, but it's really sad because he's never actually going to be able to have a real relationship with Gretchen. He says so himself, you know, the me on the outside is not me. You do not have a relationship with me, really. And there is something that is very sad about, you know, knowing what you are missing out on. We saw that at the end of the first season when he saw his son briefly, and then he knew, like, I have a son. And of course, that's incredibly upsetting to have gotten that brief glimpse of your child, but not even know what his name is. And of course, we have another question about what actually constitutes infidelity when it comes to innies with Bert and his husband Fields. It was incredible to see John Noble. He's always fantastic. And I did joke about Irving joining a throuple with them. And I mean, who knows? I am very suspicious of Outie Bert, though. Unfortunately, he's clearly up to no good. You know, Fields let it slip that he had actually been working for Lumen for 20 years, even though he claimed he started working there when Severance started about 12 years ago. And I did go back and check in the tape we saw at Bert's retirement party in the first season. He says that he has had that job for 7 years. So he's clearly lying about something. And I have seen people theorizing that actually maybe Bert was never actually severed. I don't necessarily believe that. First and foremost, because my heart wants to believe in love. If Bert and Irving was all a lie the whole time, that would just break my heart. And also, if he actually was there to spy on Irving and see what he was up to, why would they have fired him? I think the explanation of, you know, wanting a version of Bert that could go to heaven along with Fields seems plausible. You know, I believe that religious people might believe that. Although obviously it is worth questioning, what exactly did Bert do in his younger years that he is so certain he is not getting into heaven? It's clearly not about just being gay, because Fields seems to believe that he's going to heaven. He seemed to accept the idea that maybe Irving and Bert had sex on the inside. I do think that Outie Bert is definitely up to something and still has connections with Lumen. I think it is very likely that he invited Irving over to dinner to give an opportunity for Mr. Drummond to break into his apartment. I'm just really worried about my guy Irving. I'm also concerned about the absence of Radar, the dog. Where is Radar? This episode also gave us some more information about Miss Huang and what she is doing being a child with an office job. It seems like she is a student of some sort in some sort of one of the Egan schools, similar to the one we know that Miss Cobell went to, where they probably indoctrinate kids from a very early age. And I did wonder if maybe this is something that all the management on severed floors goes through, so they know they have people who are really drinking the Kool-Aid, who really believe in the Lumen mission. It seems likely that Mr. Milchick also went through a program like that, the way that he disciplined himself for his infractions and sent himself to the break room, basically. That was very sad. I am glad that this season is giving us more from Mr. Milchick. I think that Tremel Tillman, the actor, is phenomenal in this role, and we have seen a more human side of him. We have seen the nonsense that he has to deal with as a black man working for this corporation, from those incredibly condescending blackface Keir Egan portraits to the way that he is berated for things like using too many big words, despite the fact that Lumen uses big words all over the place. They admonish him for using too many big words in the same pamphlet where they talk about how the Orkbo was calamitous. Lumen calls their weird goat raising department mammalians nurturables. They have this whole area called the perpetuity wing. They use all kinds of big words, but all of a sudden it's a problem when he's doing it. We also see that Mr. Milchick does care for the innies to some degree. One of the biggest things that he is called out for is kindness reforms. So we will have to see if that leads anywhere, if Milchick is going to become increasingly disillusioned with Lumen and start to question what he is doing there. He's such a great character, and I love what they have done with him this season. And speaking of Lumen management, where the fuck is Miss Cobell? I miss my beautiful princess. I want her to do something unhinged. I know Patricia Arquette is still on the show. I think her name is still in the opening credits, but we haven't seen her for like 3 episodes now, and I'm getting worried. So I think that's all I have to say about these episodes for now. This show is really great. I am having a blast. Can't wait for more.